Welcome back to Schmattz Outdoors, everyone. I think we're going to start kind of at the beginning here. We're going to start with my bait. So I've had plenty of questions on kind of what I was doing, that type of stuff. If you guys have comments on, you do this differently, I should have done this, that type of stuff, please leave them down below, because like I said, I'm sort of a novice at this. I mean, I've basically done this twice now myself. And we're going to get into some of the things I did differently this time than last time that helped me have better success this time, and the fact that it only took me 2 days instead of 10 plus, or maybe not even filling my tag. So we're going to start with a bait. So 6 years ago when I did it myself, and 10 years ago when I hunted, the gentleman who took me up there that kind of guided me along, they were afraid of overfeeding the bears. They had some issues in the past with baiting, and then baiting a large amount of bait, and then like 3 days later the bears would finally show back up again, and they were contributing that to overfeeding the bears. Well, what ended up happening, interestingly, 6 years ago when I hunted, one of the baits had a bear on it at it was like 10 o'clock at night, so they would come in after dark. It had a very distinguishable mark on it, so you could tell it was the same bear. We had another bait that was like 2 miles away, and another bait that was like 2 miles from that. And that bear, in one night, at 10 o'clock hit one bait, at like 3 o'clock in the morning hit the next bait, and at like 8 o'clock in the morning hit the third bait. So that bear had traveled 4 miles that night and hit all 3 baits, or hit 3 of the baits. I think that's what's going on in the area that they're hunting. It's a little more broken farmland, and then broken clods of woods, that are maybe 80 acres here, then you gotta go 88 or go a mile over to the next block of woods or whatever. And I kind of think the bears are just doing a big route in there, and I think that's what they were contributing to overfeeding the bears. They were thinking the bears are just going and laying out in the woods, and because they overfed, just laying out there and just chilling for 3 days until they're hungry again, come back and eat. So I've done a lot of research in the last 6 years, and I haven't found that to be the case anywhere. Once you start feeding the bears, they're only going to eat until they're basically full, and then they're going to leave. They may come back even in the same day, several times in the same day, and feed. And I actually had that this year on bait number 1. I had that bear that had kind of the mohawk. He had it looked blonde in the nighttime pictures, and it was chocolate colored in the daytime. He was in there 3 or 4 times a day. So with that in mind, what they were doing is they were only baiting, and what they kind of taught me is they were only baiting maybe a dozen donuts at a time. The issue I had with that is basically like the first bear that comes in eats all your bait. I had other bears come by my baits last time, but you only got like 1 or 2 pictures of them, and then they didn't come back, or they wouldn't come back for a week. So this time I wanted to make sure that there was bait there all the time. That didn't end up happening. That's part of my lessons learned on this whole thing, and I'll explain a few reasons why as we go, why that didn't happen. But I was making sure I was dumping, a 5-gallon pail plus a bait there in order to make sure that, there was bait there consistently for them. So for the bait, I'm going to give a shout out. I'm not getting paid for any of these recommendations. I'm going to pop some pictures up in there as we go along here, so you guys can kind of see. I'm not going to put any contact information in there. I'm going to give you the name, but you guys can look them up. They're easy enough to find. So I got a hold of, it's Wildwood Bear Bait by Little Falls, Minnesota. He was nice enough to work with me, met me on a Sunday afternoon, saved me hundreds of miles of driving to get there because I was already sort of coming by there. He was nice enough to meet me. Very good gentleman to work with. And I bought my bait from him. I ended up buying a 55-gallon barrel of granola clusters from him, couple boxes of licorice, some dots, and some syrup from him, some M&Ms, and some cookies. And I'm going to go through kind of all that stuff here. Yeah, so great gentleman to work with. He has lots of bait. He has lots of variety. If you guys want to use popcorn, nuts, you know, he had all kinds of different flavors of candy, flavors of licorice, all that stuff if you want that. He also had pre-mixed bags of bait, you know, that had a little bit of everything kind of all mixed together. I've been giving that a lot of thought lately, that might have been a better way to go than what I did, and I'll explain that as we go here. So again, so my mix was granola clusters. In a 5-gallon pail, I figured I was putting about 3.5 to 3 3/4 gallons of granola in there. And then the candies made up all the rest of it. So we'll kind of go over what that is. So I'm guessing roughly about 3.5 gallons of granola. I had 2 different kinds of cookies. So I had chocolate chip cookies and sugar M&M cookies. You know, they were like cookies like that, big around, kind of flat cookies. I was throwing in probably, I don't know, 15 cookies into each pail. That doesn't sound like a lot, but I had a lot of other things going on in my bait as well. So that they added up, you know, they're somewhat bulky, so they added up to a fair amount of room. All right, so red and black licorice. So he had boxes of red and black licorice. I ended up taking a cooking shears, and I literally clipped them into nibs. I didn't want to leave, like the red licorice was one huge long string. It was most of a, you know, box of licorice was all basically one huge long piece. So I literally took a pruning shears and a 5-gallon pail, and I just sat in my living room, went clip, 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 and cut it into anywhere from 1/2 to 1 inch long pieces. I wanted it to be smaller pieces so the bears couldn't just pick it up and like take, you know, a mouthful of licorice and walk off. I wanted to try and keep the bears on my bait and not be able to walk off. So that's the difference between hunting with donuts and hunting with a granola and that type of kind of a loose bait. The donuts, I last time I had a picture of a bear that had 3 donuts in his mouth at one time, and that's the only picture I had of him. He come in, grabbed donuts, it took a picture of him, and he was gone. And I didn't get any more pictures of him that day, or within, you know, a time period there. So he didn't stay at my bait site. He picked them up and he left. Well, I didn't want that to happen this time. So that's why I kind of come up with a loose bait. So the granola, you basically had to sit there and eat it. You can't, like, they could get a mouthful, but you're probably not getting a huge mouthful of granola. It's going to run out. So that's why I didn't leave. Like the black licorice was all like normal licorice sticks. The red licorice was more like red vines, but it was like a huge long string of it, the whole box essentially. So I sat there, it took me, I don't know, probably 2 hours for each box, literally just sitting there watching TV, going clip, 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 and cutting nibs essentially out of the licorice. That worked out very well. It's sort of time consuming. I had the time, I wasn't doing anything else. Would I do it again? I don't know, but the licorice was stuck together in the boxes as well. So it's not like you could have just taken, you know, and grabbed a handful of, you know, black licorice pieces out of a box and throwing them in your pail. You had to kind of like peel them apart. They were stuck together pretty darn good in those boxes. So I'm glad that I decided to cut them into nibs, because otherwise I probably wouldn't even open the box until I was ready to start mixing bait, and then I'd have been mad that I couldn't get it torn apart. So I ended up with, I bought a box of each. I ended up with about 6.5 gallons of black licorice and about 4 gallons or 4.5 gallons of red licorice. It just happened to be how packed it was. Like the red licorice was just kind of, you know, one big long string kind of coiled up in the box. The black licorice was literally packed in there and you couldn't have got any more in the box. So I bought a box again. I don't know how much weight was in a box. I'm guessing somewhere around 40-ish pounds, but I don't know 100%. They were heavy, you know, and they were about like that long, about that wide, and they're 8 inches thick. So you get a decent amount, and it was like 3 boxes for 20 bucks. So it's rather reasonable, I guess, when it comes to the amount of volume you're getting for 20 bucks. You know, if you wanted to feed just candies, you know, 100 bucks would have got you, you know, probably 30 gallons of bait. So I bought a box of red and green Christmas dots, kind of the minty flavored dots. It was a box of mixed colors all together. That worked out very well, and I probably would do that again. I bought a bag. He had bags of like broken M&Ms, like just plain old chocolate M&Ms. You know, there was ones that were snapped off. They were misprinted, or not misprinted, but they were just off colors, just odds and ends, you know, stuff that M&Ms can't sell. He literally had a bag, a 50-pound bag of those. So I bought a bag of M&Ms. And then he also had some syrup. I was going in planning on just using like some maple syrup or blueberry syrup, whatever he had, but he had this Dunkin' syrup that actually smelled like glazed donuts. So I ended up buying a box of that had 4 jugs in there that were probably a liter a piece, probably. I don't know exactly how big they were. They were about that square and about this high, and actually had a pumper nozzle, even though I didn't use that. I just opened it up and poured it in my pails. But so yeah, that's what I ended up buying from him. I also had bought some candy corn. So I got a Sam's Club membership, and 2 years ago already, or it might have even been 3 years ago, I was in there right after Halloween, and they had 5-pound bags of them, and they were only a couple bucks for a 5-pound bag, and I bought 4 of them. Hindsight, you know, knowing what I know now, that's not probably all that much when it comes to the baiting world, but I already had them, so I mixed them in with my bait as well. And then I had some powdered molasses meant for like horse feed or, you know, cattle feed, whatever, you know. And so what I did is I just basically mixed that in with my granola. Again, I don't know if I'd do that again. I had it already. I bought it for this purpose, but I don't know if that really benefited me all that much here as well. So, all right. So what I ended up with is candy. I had probably that much in the bottom of a 5-gallon pail, a few cookies on top, and then granola filled up the rest of a 5-gallon pail. When I made 6 gallons of bait, I basically did the same amount of candy in every pail, and I just added basically another gallon of granola in there. I had 3 6-gallon pails, and I bought 3 pails on purpose. Sorry, there's mosquitoes flying around. 3 6-gallon pails on purpose, because I knew that like the first day I baited, I wanted extra bait. And when I went up to rebait the next weekend, I wanted, you know, the extra gallon of bait. So I bought 3 6-gallon pails. I just added a little more granola in there. All right, so that was, and what I did is I stirred it all together. And then I mixed everything but the liquid in there, except for the syrup in there, kind of stirred it all up. And then dumped the syrup in there, and then kind of just let that like soak through. We'll get into some more about the syrup here at the end. I had 2 little spray bottles, so that's what I used for the bait that was on the ground. I also did some scents that were up in the trees. I had liquid smoke, and I had pure anise extract, and I bought a quart of liquid smoke, and I used most of the quart. I had, I don't know, maybe a cup and a half of it left, so I used like a pint and a cup probably. I had enough. I figured I could easily get through the whole first week of hunting, you know, spraying the trees, and I'm very generous with that. I wanted to make sure that, you know, I got plenty of scent in the air. Again, spraying the underside of the trees, or spraying it up basically as high as you can get it, to try and get so it gets up in the wind and the air moves the scent around. So you end up spraying it on the underside of the trees, but that does 2 things. Gets it up in the air, but also if it rains or you get a heavy dew, it's on the underside of the leaves, so it doesn't like rinse it off right away. And then the anise extract, I bought roughly a pint, and I ended up running out of that about, I don't know, maybe the Saturday of the weekend right before hunting season. So I made it basically 2.5 weekends of baiting with a pint. And I just had it in little spray bottles. I had a brown one and a clear one. I had the anise in the clear one. The brown one was liquid smokes, because they're actually kind of those colors anyway. So I kind of knew which one was which. And then when I run out of the anise, then I was just spraying liquid smoke. I didn't mind that I run out of the anise, and here's the reason why. all the anise was for is to try and attract bears into your bait. Well, by the time the third weekend come, the bears should have been already at my bait by that point. I mean, obviously, the pictures I did get showed you there was bears at my bait. So, you know, throughout, I struggled a little bit right at the beginning of the hunting season of the bears not being there. And I have some theories on that too. But, yeah, so running out of the anise, I wasn't so bad because the bears should already been in there. Do I still need to put the scent up in the air? I don't know. So here's my thoughts on that. I wanted to do it every day I was in there as kind of like a dinner bell, like ding ding, supper's here, come and get it. So, you know, it does mellow during the day. Some of the baits I could walk in and I could smell it when I walked in there, like the liquid smoke in particular. But I wanted to freshen it up every day just to kind of say, hey, there's fresh bait here, come and get it. I had some honey. So my father raises bees. I actually got some beehives that are out here on the outside of our yard here. So when he's extracting the honey, he always gets some honey mixed in with the wax and whatever. It's hard to separate without kind of burning the honey a little bit. You know, it discolors it. You just can't sell it. So what he just kept me the last few years, he's just kept some of that burnt honey, just put it in milk jugs. So I ended up with having 4 gallons of honey to use. I actually tasted, the one jug had a lot of wax in there. It actually didn't pour very well at all. But like some of the other stuff was actually, you know, nice liquid honey, and I tasted it. It did have it tasted very sweet like honey should, but it had a little bit of a burnt flavor to it. So 4 gallons of that. I actually meant to use it as a trailing scent. So I was dumping my pile of bait as you guys saw, and then I was basically just making a circle around it, like 6 inches away from my bait, roughly. Just making a circle and dumping the honey on the ground. Well, it turns out that the bears were eating the dang honey, because the bait I shot my bear off of, bait number 3, after the first weekend, the bears had literally dug like a moat. It was like 6 inches wide or deep and like that wide, where they literally had dug exactly where I had poured my honey on the ground. So it must have soaked into the dirt a little bit, and they literally were eating the dirt, because it's not like they dug and there was a pile of dirt. The dirt was all gone. So they were eating the dirt to get the honey. I meant it to be a trailing scent, you know, something sticky to get on their paws, you know, so they would track it in and out of the woods. I'm 50-50 on whether that's even important to get a trailing scent like that. Does it help? Maybe. I don't know. I think they just smell your bait and they come in and find your bait, and then they make their own trails in and out of there anyway. So I don't know. I would definitely use the honey again. I mean, obviously bears like honey, and I would probably use it the same way. Just, do they get any of it on their paws and make trailing scent with it? I don't know, but at least tracted them, and once they were in there, they're eating it. So, and that's the whole point of baiting, is to get them in there and eating it. So, all right. I mentioned it a few times in the video. I didn't really want to like show you the brand, but I have no reason not to. Again, this is what I used. You guys might be using something different. I had a gallon jug, a white gallon jug in my pail. I actually meant it to mix it in with my bait instead of using the syrup. But once I realized like syrup is a little stickier, it kind of help, you know, it kind of stick to the bait instead of the bait having to like absorb it. So I had a blueberry liquid. It was Moultrie brand. We'll pop a picture up here. It comes in gallon jugs. I actually got it on sale a year ago already, because I planned on having this tag a year ago and just didn't get drawn. So I had 4 gallons of it already bought before I had went to Wildwood Bear Bait, and then found out that he had the syrup that he had. So what I ended up using is actually kind of a scent. I literally was just taking it and splashing it up on the back, or, you know, on the trees that were right behind my bait. The bait I shot my bear off of, I didn't have a real good tree, so there was one small little clump of brush that the bear like walked around to get to my bait. I was just splashing it on that the best I could, and it kind of splashed more on the ground than anything right there. But so yeah, it was a Moultrie brand. I used almost all 4 gallons that I had bought. you know, I kind of was going all in on that week to shoot my bear that week. If I didn't get the bear that week, I had to work a week and then I'd be on vacation again, which is what I'm at right now. I would have probably ended up buying some more of a few of these things. I would have definitely needed bear bait had I not gotten one the first week, but I would have probably bought some more of this blueberry liquid to splash. I probably had enough liquid smoke to get me by, but I would have had to resupply a little bit had I not gotten my bear. All right, one thing I want to mention, I did not want to mess with cooking oil. Wildwood Bear Bait had 5-gallon jugs of cooking oil. I've seen a lot of people using. I've watched a lot of videos. I've read articles. Like I said, I've done a lot of research in 6 years. A lot of people use cooking oil. I just did not want to deal with the mess of the cooking oil. So I'm not carrying, I had to carry my bait in because I was hunting on public land. I carried it, I mean, almost a quarter mile or over a quarter mile for 2 of the bear baits. I wasn't carrying a 5-gallon jug of cooking oil in there. Okay, so plus 5 gallons of bait or more, and then everything else, the other liquids I just talked about, the honey, the blueberry, which I already had it, but if I didn't have that, I would use cooking oil instead of that, and then the anise and the liquid smoke. So I had to carry all that stuff in there. So I wasn't going to carry 5 gallons of it, which means I'm probably trying to dump it into gallon jugs or something a little bit more reasonable for me to carry in there. And now I'm carrying 3 gallons of stuff plus the liquid smoke and the anise, which, you know, ends up being another quart roughly, plus a 5-gallon pail of bait. And dumping one into a bigger jug into a smaller jug, you know as well as I do, you're not going to do that every time and not spill some on the ground, on the side of the jug, on your hands, on everything. And I just did not want to deal with the mess of the cooking oil. So I had a few comments on the YouTube videos. I've had other people comment personally to me. That is just not something I was interested in. And I'm kind of standing by that. It might be a great attractant. I just do not want to deal with it. If I was hunting on private land where I could drive right up to my bait, I would have 100% bought some cooking oil. You know, where I only have to carry it 10 feet, splash it on the trees and walk away. Me carrying my bait into the public land, I wasn't going to do that. So I appreciate your comments like that. I don't want to degrade the comments that people made. I appreciate you guys putting in there that cooking oil works. I just want to kind of set the record straight. That's why I didn't want to use it. But if you have other comments, please put them down below, other suggestions, that type of stuff. I do really appreciate you guys commenting and trying to help me and or other people out as well. But yeah, cooking oil just wasn't something I was interested in. So final thought on bear bait. I went through, I kind of told you how much I bought of everything. I figured I made about 100 gallons of bear bait in 5-gallon pails, you know, or 6-gallon pails worth. About 100 gallons total. I figured I used about 75 gallons of that, but I was rationing it towards the end of the season. You know, I was baits 1 and 2, I basically was only going into every other day. And then when I was in there, I was only dumping like 2.5 gallons of bait. In bait 3, where I shot my bear, I was going every other day, going 4 gallons, then 2 gallons, then 4 gallons, and then 2 gallons. Again, because I was trying to stretch it out to make sure, like, if I ended up hunting all the way to the end of that first week, I wanted to make sure I still had bait to at least bait the one I planned on hunting. You know, I didn't want to run out. So turns out, you know, I had about 100 gallons. The couple that let me use their shed, they had some bear hunters that were going to come later on. I actually just donated about 25 gallons worth of bear bait to those guys because I didn't end up using it. But had I hunted through the whole week, I probably would have either been very close to running out or would have run out. Which the problem with that is I wouldn't have been up there for a whole week, and I wouldn't have had basically hardly any to put there to get me through that week. And the next week I'd have basically been starting over again. So, all right, so that's all I got on bear bait. I want to make a point, so please leave your comments down below if it's baiting, hunting, my bear, the hunt, anything I did. I'm open to any kind of comments you want. I encourage you to read through the comment section, so add your comments down there. I typically try to reply to them. Generally, my comments aren't just like, oh, great video. There are a few comments like that, and I'm glad to hear it. Honestly, I like to know that you guys like what I put out. But there are a lot of like comments where people put, you know, like use frying oil. Well, I actually respond to those comments, and I try to put in basically what I told you guys here, that I just didn't want to deal with the mess. But there's a lot of comments in my videos that there actually is a lot of good information down there that doesn't get into the video, something I might have missed or didn't even think about until somebody commented it. And sometimes there's pretty good chats back and forth between me and the commenters. So they're definitely worth reading through. I feel like a video like this is a perfect place to have those type of conversations. So there's probably could be, you know, some good information in the comments section as well. So I encourage you guys to read through them. If you don't want to add to the conversation, I'm perfectly fine with that. But like I said, there's probably some information down there for everyone as well. So leave your comments, read through the comments. I appreciate you guys watching Schmattz Outdoors. Stay tuned for the next video.